Vice investigates a case involving stolen babies and shady adoptions. Baby Blues was directed by Daniel Attias and was written by Dick Wolf and Michael Duggan, the same team credited with writing the last episode, Better Living Through Chemistry. This one isn't much better. Vice raids a plane arriving in South Florida from Colombia, expecting to find it filled with cocaine. Instead, they find it full of babies, some of them dead from the stress of travel, who have been stolen from their impoverished mothers to be adopted by rich families in Miami. A young woman named Maria Escobar, played by Patrice Martinez, tumbles out of the cargo hold where she'd stowed away. Her own baby was stolen 16 months ago, and she's come to Miami in search of him. While kidnapped babies are outside of Vice's realm, Trudy and Gina ask Castillo for permission to look into it anyway. Crockett and Tubbs visit the Colombian consulate and ask to see their adoption records, but are given the runaround. Switek and Zito have more luck at social services, where a helpful caseworker gives them access to her files. They find that almost all Colombian adoptions were handled by one man, a prominent lawyer named Howard Famiglia, played by Tommy Koenig. Gina and Trudy take Maria Escobar around to families who have recently adopted Colombian babies in search of her kidnapped son. They talk to Stephen DeMarco, the adoptive father of one of the babies, who is happy to speak on the record about Famiglia's shady practices. He agrees to testify in front of the grand jury. DeMarco is played by Stanley Tucci of The Devil Wears Prada, Big Night, The Hunger Games, and many other films. While he only has a small part in this episode, Tucci will return to Miami Vice on 2 subsequent occasions in a larger and more important role. Trudy and Gina locate Maria Escobar's kidnapped son, identifiable through a distinctive birthmark, who is now living with a wealthy family. His adoptive mother angrily sends them away, then calls Famiglia in a panic. Vice's investigation alarms Famiglia's accomplice, a social services caseworker named Angela Mitchell, played by Jane Brucker, best known as Baby's older sister in Dirty Dancing. Angela meets with Famiglia to discuss their mounting legal problems. She's horrified to realize how blasé Famiglia is about the dead babies on the plane. Famiglia sends his thuggish chauffeur to threaten the DeMarcos, and a freaked-out Stephen DeMarco rescinds his promise to testify, so Vice serves Angela with a grand jury summons. Famiglia retaliates by having his chauffeur murder both Angela and his contact at the Colombian consulate. While Hanging by a Thread by Mike and the Mechanics plays, Crockett and Tubbs race to the chauffeur's home to arrest him. They find his corpse in a closet wired with explosives and barely make it out of his home before it explodes in a big fireball. Vice sets a trap for Famiglia. They arrange for Maria Escobar to be interviewed by a news reporter who claims she has evidence that could convict Famiglia. Famiglia sneaks into Maria's hospital room through the air conditioning vent to kill her, only to find Vice waiting for him. Gina, Crockett, and Tubbs shoot and kill him. It ends with Maria being reunited with her stolen child, who is distraught at the prospect of leaving his adoptive parents. While Love by You by Joan Armatrading plays, Maria tearfully decides to leave her son with them. It's a heartstrings-tugging ending, and we can see that Maria genuinely wants what's best for her son and thinks she's leaving him in a better situation than she could provide for him, and doesn't want to traumatize him further by ripping him away from what he thinks of as his home. But it was clear from early in the episode that the adoptive mother knows the adoption was at the very least fishy, and even if they're capable of giving the son a good life, or at least a life full of money, maybe they shouldn't be rewarded for buying a kid who is kidnapped from his heartbroken mother. There's also always a risk in episodes like this one where Vice is investigating a case that Vice should not be investigating, in that it always seems like someone had an idea that they were desperate to shoehorn into an episode regardless of whether or not it makes sense in the bigger picture of the show. And that's certainly the case with this episode. Miami Vice is always strongest when it operates within the relatively narrow realm of vice, and that is drug deals, gambling, sex work, and arms deals. If it lets that focus drift too much, then it gets away from all of those marvelous themes at the core of the show about how undercover vice work forces you to outwardly adopt a set of beliefs that go against your own personal moral code, and how that will wear away at you over time. If those themes are lost, it becomes very difficult to differentiate Miami Vice from any other cop show, particularly in this season, which has already knowingly abandoned the signature pastel color palette and the glamorous locales and the hyper-stylized look and feel that made this show so distinctive in those first 2 seasons. This episode also relies on sentiment to cover a weak and sloppy story. It's counting on viewers being so outraged by the dastardly Famiglia, who steals babies from their mothers and doesn't care if babies die in the process, that they'll overlook how the story isn't told with any particular finesse. By the time a nun is making fat jokes about Switek and a white-collar lawyer is crawling through air conditioning vents to gun down Maria in her hospital bed, I was tired of this episode. 2 flamingos for this one. I'm not gonna lie, we're in the middle of a rough patch. But at least next episode features a very young Bill Paxton and a very young Wesley Snipes, both of whom are enjoyable to watch. So we have that to look forward to. Thank you for hanging in there with me, and I will see you here next time. Goodbye.